Hello guys, today we're reading Royal Dahl, the Boy, and it is illustrated by Quentin Blake. So let's get started. Starting point. Papa and Mama. My father, Harold Dahl, was a Norwegian who came from a small town near Oslo called Sharpborg. His own father, my grandfather, was a fairly prosperous merchant who owns a store in Sharpworks and trade in just about everything from cheese to chicken wire. I am writing this word in 1984, but this grandfather of mine was born, believe it or not, in 1820, shortly after Wellington had defeated Napoleon at Waterloo. If my grandfather has been alive today, he would have been 164 years old. My father would have been 121. Both my father and my grandfather was late starters so far as children were concerned. When my father was 14, which is still more than 100 years ago, he was off on the roof of the family house replacing some loose tiles when he slipped and fell. He broke his left arm below the elbow. Somebody ran to fetch the doctor, and half an hour later the gentleman makes a majestic and drunken arrival in his horse-drawn buggy. He was so drunk that he mistook the fractured elbow for a dislocated elbow. Well, soon put the bags into place, he cried out, and two men were called up the streets to help with some pulling. They were instructed to hold my father in the waist while the doctor grabbed him by the wrist of the broken arm and shouted, "Pull, man, pull! Pull as hard as you can!" The pain must have been excruciating, the victim screamed, and his mother, who was watching the performance in horror, shouted, "Stop!" But by then the puller had done so much damage that the splinter of a bone was sticking out through the skin of the forearm. This was in 1877, and orthopedic surgery was not what it is today. So they simply amputated the arms at the elbow, and for the rest of his life my father had to manage with one arm. Fortunately, it was the left arm that he lost, and gradually, over the years, he taught himself to do more or less anything he wanted with just the four fingers and thumbs of his right hand. He could tie a shoelace as quickly as you or me, and for cutting off the foot of his plate, he sharpened the bottom edge of the fork so he served as both knives and forks in one. He kept his ingenious instruments in a slim leather case and carried it in his pocket wherever he went. The loss of an arm, he used to say, caused him only one serious inconvenience. He found it possible to cut the top of a boiled egg. My father was a year or so older than his brother, Oscar, but they were exceptionally close, and soon after they left school, they went for a long walk together to plan their future. They decided that a small town like Sharpworth in a small country like Norway was no place in which to make a fortune. So what they must do, they agreed. One was go away to one of the big countries, either to England or France, where opportunities to make good would be boundless. Their own father, an amiable giant nearly 7 foot tall, lacked the drive of the ambition of his sons, and he refused to support this tuneful idea. When he forbade them to go, they ran away from home, and somehow the two of them managed to work their way to France on a cargo ship. From Calais, they went to Paris, and in Paris they agreed to separate because each of them wished to be an independent of the other. Uncle Oscar, for some reason, headed west for La Rochelle on the Atlantic coast, while my father remained in Paris for the time being. The story of how these two brothers each started in totally separate businesses in different countries and how each of them made a fortune is interesting, but how is no time to tell it here expects in a brief, fast manner. Take my uncle Oscar first. La Rochelle was then, and still is, a fishing port. By the time he was 40 and he had become a waitlist man in town. He owned a place of stroller called Pitchers the Atlantico, and a large canning factory to can the sardine his stroller brought in. He acquired a wife from a good family and a magnificent townhouse, as well as a large chateau in the country. He became a collector of Louis XV furniture, good pictures, and rare books, and all these beautiful things together with the two properties from still in the family. I have not seen the chateau in the country, but I was in La Rochelle house a couple of years ago, and it really is something. The furniture alone should be in a museum. While Uncle Oscar was bursting around in La Rochelle, his one-armed brother Harold, my own father, was not sitting on the rump doing nothing. He had met his Paris another young Norwegian called Anderson, and the two of them now decided to form a partnership and become shipbrokers. A shipbroker is a person who supplies a ship with everything it needs when it comes into port: fuels and food, ropes and paints, soaps and towels, hammers and nails, and thousands of other tiddly little items. A shipbroker is a kind of enormous shopkeeper for ships, and by far the most important item for supplies to them is the fuel on which the ship's engine runs. In those days, fuel meant only one thing. It meant coal. There were no oil-burning motor ships on the high seas at the time. All ships were steamships, and these old steamers would take hundreds and often thousands of tons in coal in one go. To the shipbrokers, coal was black gold. My father and his new-found friend, Mr. Edmondson, understood all this very well. It made sense. They told each other to set up their shipbroking business in one of the great coaling parts of Europe. Which was it to be? The answer was simple. The greatest coaling port in the world at the time was Cardiff in South Wales. So off to Cardiff they went. These two amphibious young men carrying with them little or no language, but my father had something more delightful than language. He had a wife, a young French girl called Mary, whom he had recently married in Paris. In Cardiff, the shipbroking firm of Anderson and Dahl was set up in a single room in the boat street was rented in an office. From then on, we had what sounds like one of these exaggerated fairy story of success, but but in reality, it was the result of tremendous hard and brainy works by those two friends. Very soon, Innocent and Dahl had more businesses than the partners could handle alone. Larger office space was acquired, and more staffs were engaged. The real money then began rolling in. Within a few years, my father was able to buy a fine house in the village of Llandaff, just outside Cardiff, and there his wife Mary bore him two children, a girl and a boy, but tragically she died after giving birth to the second child. When the shocks and sorrow over death had begun to subside a little, my father suddenly realized that his two small children ought at the very least to have a stepmother to care for them. What is more, he felt terribly lonely. It was quite obvious that he must try to find himself another wife, but this was easier said than done for a Norwegian living in South Wales, who didn't know very many people, so he decided to take a holiday and travel back to his own country, Norway, and who knows, he might, if he was lucky, find himself a lovely new bride in his own country. Over in Norway, during the summer of 1911, while taking a trip in a small coastal steamer in the Oslofjord, he met a young lady called Sophie Magdalene Hasselberg. Being a fellow who knows a good things when he saw one, he proposed to her within a week and married her soon after that. Harold Dahl was his Norwegian wife on a honeymoon in Paris. After that back to his house in Llandaff. The two of them were deeply in love and blissfully happy, and during the next 6 years, she bore him 4 children, a girl, another girl, a boy, me, and a third girl. These were now 6 children in a family, 2 of my father's first wives and 4 of his seconds. A larger and grander house was needed, and the money was there to buy it. So in 1918, when I was 2, we all moved into an imposing country mansion beside the village of Radier, about 8 miles west of Cardiff. I remember it as a mighty house with turrets on its roof and with majestic lawns and terraces all around it. There were many areas of farms and woodlands, and a number of cottages for the staff. Very soon the meadows were full of milking cows, and the sties were full of pigs, and the chicken runs was full of chickens. There were several massive shire horses for pulling the plough and the hay wagons, and there was a postman and a cowman and a couple of gardeners and the manors for servants in a house itself. Like his brother Oscar in La Rochelle, Harold Dahl was made in no uncertain manner. But what interests me most of all about these 2 brothers, Harold and Oscar, is this. Although they came from a simple, unsophisticated small-town family, both of them, quite independently one of the other, developed a powerful interest in beautiful things. As soon as they could afford it, they began to fill their houses with lovely paintings and fine furniture. In addition to that, my father became an expert gardener and above all a collector of alpine plants. My mother used to tell me how the 2 of them would go on an expedition up into the mountains of Norway, and how he would frighten her to death by climbing 100 up steep cliff face to reach small alpine trees growing high up into some rocky ledge. He was also an accomplished woodcarver, and most of the mirror frames in the house were his own work. So indeed was an interior mantelpiece around the fireplace in the living room, a splendid design of fruits and foliage in intertwining branches carved in oak. He was a tremendous diary writer. I still have one of his many notebooks from the great wars of 1914-80. Every single day during these 5 war years he would write several pages of comments and observation about the events of the time. He wrote with a pen and although Norwegian in his mother tongue. He always wrote his diaries in perfect English. He harbored a curious story about how he developed a sense of beauty in the minds of his children. Every time my mother became pregnant, she would wait until the last 3 months of her pregnancy, and then he would announce to her that the glorious walks must begin. The glorious walks consisted for him taking her to places of great beauty in the countryside and walking with her for about an hour each day so that she could observe the splendor of the surroundings. His theory was that if the eyes of the pregnant woman was constantly observing the beauty of nature, this beauty would somehow become transmitted to the wings of the unborn baby within her womb, and the baby would grow up into a lover of beautiful things. This was a treatment that all of his children received before they were born. So today I will end here and see you next time.